Today's video is brought to you by PicDrop, a premier photo sharing solution. Click on the link in the description box for your free trial. How's it? I'm an accidental portrait photographer. I absolutely did not want to be in a room with a stranger taking photographs of them when I was younger. I would want a hole to open up and for me to fall through it. I was extremely shy when I was younger, and I still am to a degree. I've gotten over it. But when I started off in photography, I did anything that I could to avoid taking pictures of people who I didn't know. Landscape photography, absolutely no problem. Architectural photography, not a problem. Street photography, yeah, I was really on the fence. Okay, it was basically, if there was a person in there who might pay attention to me, who I didn't know, I would just like, horrible. And I think part of this idea was a problem that was planted, a little seed in my mind, when I was just getting interested in photography, about what a portrait photographer was. Now, I'd seen videos of landscape photographers, and not videos, I mean TV shows in those days, and they were all very relaxed, calm. I mean, you know, if you watch an Ansel Adams thing, you would never say that he's an energetic person. He's certainly not leaping around. He's communing with nature, for want of a better word. And that personality fitted with me, rather than say videos or film footage that I'd seen of Richard Avedon or David Bailey. You know, they're jumping around, they're involved. You know, Philippe Hausman leaping into the air with his subject. It felt like, to be a portrait photographer, that one had to have a huge personality, that you were like a conductor, like a Herbert von Karajan, waving your baton around, conducting an orchestra and create great photographs. And so that idea, coupled with my sort of timidness, for want of a better word, really made me fearful of portrait photography. Now, that was a bit of a problem because I was at photo school. We had assignments that we were required to do portraits of people. And I would generally photograph only people who I knew, either my classmates or people, friends from school. And over time, the lecturers actually kind of pointed out, they said, look, Alex, you only ever photograph either your classmates or people who you really need to get other people in. In fact, I don't think they went as far as saying you can't photograph anybody you know, but that was the impression that I got. And there's a photographer who I really wish I'd been introduced to at that time, who I think, her approach would have been a godsend for me to see, because it absolutely would have been the right moment, right direction for the fledgling portrait photographer within me. And how I got into portrait photography is, we'll get touch onto that later on. But I thought, if you are struggling with the idea of portrait photography, that if you're nervous about approaching strangers or even people who you know and taking photographs, or being out on the street, then Jane Bowen's approach to portrait photography is going to be, I think, exactly what you're looking for. So I've been reminded about Jane in the comments section of one of my recent videos. And she's kind of slipped out of my consciousness for a while. But as soon as somebody mentioned it, I went, that's that woman, that's that lady. So she was a photographer for the Observer newspaper for like 6 decades. And she only photographed natural light. She only photographed really black and white. And she used a couple of OM Olympus cameras. All very simple. And she would turn up at the shoots. If you see pictures of Jane, she looks like a housewife from the south of England, right? And she'd also turn up with I believe a wicker basket that she kept her cameras in. I mean, you could imagine also there'd be like a checkcloth thing with some sandwiches and a flask of tea in there, right? And she would photograph the great and the good. Over 6 decades, she photographed every British Prime Minister from Harold Macmillan. She would photograph people like Desmond Tutu, film stars innumerous. And her photography and her approach are at complete odds with what we see, especially these days in celebrity portraiture. That, albeit I appreciate that it's very much an American kind of thing, but lots of overblown sets and really just kind of crazy ideas and things like that. Just in your face things. Now, don't get me wrong, I like those kind of photographs. However, if I look at Jane's work is more my speed. And that's what I would have appreciated. The fact that Jane doesn't have this larger than life personality. She just turns up, looks for the light, places the person in the light, and just without any fuss, sets to work and waits for the moment when everything just aligns and then you get a portrait. Now, at this stage, I want to stress the difference between a portrait and a picture of somebody. A lot of my photography, I think, kind of straddles a line between, occasionally you get like a portrait, but a portrait for me is something where you see the character of the person. That they connect with you through that photograph and show you a bit of themselves. Celebrity photography these days often, once again, as a personal opinion, I feel falls into the category of more, it's like a fashion shoot or a spectacle. The person, even though they have their own personality, is playing a role. I think, if you look at Mark Seliger's photographs, if you look at Annie Leibovitz, and, to a degree, Vincent Peters, who I've talked about. Now, I love all of those photographs, but I don't think they are really portraits, certainly not in the strictest sense. Whereas Jane's photographs are. Now, I think partly this is because she's a newspaper photographer. She was a newspaper photographer. So they're not going to be big glossy spreads. They're there just to illustrate an article. And she's doing a lot of them. In now, bang, right, it's done and dusted. Also kind of the time frame of the thing. But if we want to get a portrait photograph, and you're like me, and I'm kind of very timid and shy, had I been given this assignment, what lessons am I going to get from Jane? Okay, well, first of all, I mentioned about the light, and I mentioned about her camera gear, Olympus OMs and some Triax. Everything is so very simple at the moment. Right? She's not going with all this light stuff and McGubbins and things and making the process more difficult. She's focusing on the things that matter. And there are two things that I think matter in these pictures of Jane's. One is the light itself, simple, natural light. And then the second is Jane's personality. Now, if you remember, back at the beginning of this conversation, I was talking about how I was very timid, very shy as a younger photographer. And I thought that was to my detriment. But actually, it was a benefit because I was the sort of person who's quite content just to stay in the shadows and listen. One of the things I've learned, and I'd imagine that there's a similar thing going on with Jane's photographs, is that if you allow the person who you're photographing, and I prefer to use the word sitter rather than subject. Subject feels like you're studying them. The sitter feels like it's involved. They will talk to you. They will feel natural because they'll talk about themselves. We all, as people, like to talk about ourselves. And if you give the person who you're photographing the ability to do that, they will relax. And when they relax, when they let that guard down of thinking they have to play a role, then they show you something of themselves. If you want a secret to taking great portrait photography, that's it, is to just ask the person, hi, how are you doing? Cool, lovely. All right, so we're going to take some photographs today. Cool. Did you manage to get here okay? Lovely. And there will be something in the conversation that you can just go, tell me more about that. Tell me more about that. That's all you need to do. And then you are ready, you have the simple setup, the simple lights, the simple camera, and your job as a portrait photographer like Jane is to sit and just to wait for that moment. I mean, I know Cartier-Bresson, we talk about, the decisive moment and stuff like that. But it is there. There's a moment, I've seen it in portrait photography where, there's an expression or an emotion comes across somebody's face, and it comes up, and then it goes. And if you are bouncing around, if you're jumping up and down, trying to be like, do this, do that, it never happens. It's a very delicate thing. It's like a butterfly. Just, hold out your hand and wait for it to just land. And when you see that moment, press the shutter. Yeah? So you don't need to be like all crazy amazing, doing all this sort of stuff. So I look at Jane's photographs and I see that. Obviously I can't ask her myself, but I recognize those kind of moments in these people's expressions. And there's a photograph in here that I think absolutely illustrates another awesome advantage of doing this. But there's an image here of Rita Tushingham. And it's a very striking portrait. It's very simple. Once again, simple, light, simple black and white. There's nothing major going on. But I think it's one of certainly the most engaging images that I've seen in here. And Rita's not looking at the camera, but she's doing something in this photograph that you absolutely should be on the lookout for when you're taking portrait photographs. I want to see if you can guess what it is. So you see Rita's hands there. She's just touching, she's rubbing her finger on the palm of her hand. And that's a very natural way of her doing something with her hands. You can't ask somebody to pose like that. You can't say, Rita, can you just rub your finger on the palm of your hand and stuff? And within those hands is communicated so much about this photograph. The expression on her face, the way the head is turned, you can contrive that. You can tell people to do this. But the hands, I think the hands in a portrait tell so much. And that's when you start looking, when you are quiet, when you allow the moment to play, and you can recognize that the person is doing something that you could never, ever have actually asked them to do, but makes the photograph. That's when you trip that shutter. Right? An easy way of doing this, right? If you feel uncomfortable about watching somebody, even if it's on the street or anything, because you can apply these approaches to any sort of photography that you're doing with people, is to next time, and I used to see this all the time in the studio, next time you're taking some shoots, and I didn't use a tripod for my portrait photography. I preferred to have the camera sort of up and down, mostly because it meant I could just move around a little bit. But that also meant that occasionally I would look at the back of the camera and I would go like this, and out of the corner of my eye, you'd see the person who photographed me. They would just they would change. So we go from being like, I'm now posed or whatever, to something, or they would do something with their hair, or they would, that sort of thing when you, like, I was at the dentist the other day and they stopped doing things and you just go clean my whatever. You do something natural. That's exactly what's going on with the sitter, is they do a natural behavior. And that's when, Courtney, you got, that's it. Hold that. That's what we're looking for. That's that approach that Jane's got, that quietness, that personality. I can't believe that it's taken me so long to find somebody whose work, I think, really, look, quite clearly, it's of another age. Okay, it is, some of it looks a little bit dated, but mostly, I think it's something that's lacking in today's photography, not just in celebrity portraiture, not just in any of this, magazine work or what have you, but also in work that you see in awards and things. Often it's about style over substance. That people tend, this is, I remember there was a photograph a couple of years ago that won like an MPA award, and it was a lady with a spectacular headdress and stuff like that, and lots of body paint and things, and that won like a kind of like the best picture or something, and the photograph itself, it's just the subject is evenly lit, and there's nothing special about the photo. There's no expression. I mean, she has an expression. She's got a model expression, but it's all about the way that she's dressed. And I appreciate that, that can be a photograph. Sometimes those sort of things happen, but it just feels like portrait photography just kind of leans into that direction the whole time, and that we kind of move away from this, like this picture of Björk on the cover here. Those things that communicate something to people. And you don't need to make a big song and dance. You don't need to, get people to jump around and leap and stuff if that's not your personality. So if you are nervous about taking photographs of people who you don't know, just think back. When I wanted to photograph somebody who was a fashion design student down the corridor, I thought, oh, she's got that kind of cool cropped white hair. And I was so nervous because I thought that she would expect me to be this larger-than-life character. And had I have photographed her in this fashion, in this way, it would have made the resulting image so much better than just her sitting there with her, like, holding up her thing like that. So, try it out. Just go there. Ask somebody about themselves. Keep your lighting simple. Find some window light. Stand by the window. Ask them to look out the window. Meter for their face. It is that simple. And then just get them to talk about their favorite holiday. And you will find that all of a sudden portrait photography is actually not scary at all. And I wish I'd found that out 20 years earlier. If you want to get a weekly hit of photographic inspiration directly to your email, then consider signing up for the Saturday Selections newsletter, which goes out weekly to almost 4,500 people. The link is in the description box below. To find out about another photographer whose work is equally simple but goes about getting personality in a different way, check out this video over here. Thank you ever so much for watching. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I will see you again soon.